So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining. Today we're going to cover two very important topics. Number one being our new release 520 that some clients have started to be updated with this week. People with QA systems have had it updated for a couple of weeks now. So we'll cover some of the important differences in 520 release, and then we'll also cover dynamic consent. So this 520 release contains two things related to dynamic consent. The APIs, so this will allow you to present those to your vendors, start the conversation about that integration. We'll cover some of those options. And then also the boberdoo form builder, which is built with dynamic consent capabilities. So to look in more detail at what we're going to be taking a look at today, first off, we have a new version of our bid modifier, which is an outside service that allows you to modify your bids. Optimization as it comes when it relates to reports. So now instead of running and waiting for the UI to process a report, you'll be able to email it. We have a couple of new good reports here to check out, as well as a new webhook so that you can communicate refunds and then in this extension dispositions upstream to your vendors. We have new error code guide, so you get more information on the errors that are received in the API responses, as well as a new an API for setting CRM status or dispositions from your buyers or partners. Just more efficient and has less restrictions there. We have a new tab called Partner Responses for clients that are typically selling on a ping post basis and want to drill down and look into specific responses for a partner. And then due to the form builder change, the manual entry form has moved from the forms manager to a sub-tab of settings. We do have an integration for Stripe for the one-off transactions currently, and then we are working on the rebilling options for Stripe as well. Kind of finishing up things here, we have the Enacta integration for either admins or partners, depending on your use case. The SSO single sign-on would allow your partners or your admins to navigate between platforms without having to re-log in. We'll take a look at Boberdoo's Trust Center, and then finally ending with the dynamic consent update. Okay, so we'll jump in and start with that bid modifier. So as you may know, Boberdoo has a tab outside services that is a bring your own credentials for any third-party calls that you want to use to factor into your processing. Boberdoo has Lead QC in there, and we have this product now, our bid modifier 2.0. So this allows you simply to set rules based off of the conditions of the incoming ping to make a modification. This is essentially an evolution of our bid experiments, which allowed you to actually A/B test. What we heard from our clients is we know and we want to be able to set this modification without having to set up a lot of filter sets. So the bid modifier is the result of that. As a note, the bid modifier is an incoming action to your system, so it could fluctuate your pricing tier. But essentially, it allows you to go through and for lead sellers to adjust their margin, for lead buyers, adjust the actual price that is being returned as the bid. So you'll see here we have options for adjusting that price, typically up or down by a percentage basis, based off of the conditions, which we're going to look at next. So sources, you may want to only apply a rule to a specific source with specific criteria. For example, in this case here, we're looking at the source sweet corn, and the additional criteria of certain sub-IDs and state restrictions. So when those conditions are met based on the ping from that incoming source, the system in this case will increase that bid by 25%. Another use case may be for all sellers to take more margin on the weekends if they're facing less competition. So that would look something where you can adjust really any of the parameters or filter options for your lead type, and it is dynamic per lead type. So there's lots of options for sending that based off of source sub-ID combinations or time of day settings, or if you're looking at hyper-competitive areas, you can take less margin to try and buy more leads on behalf of your partner. This is something that has to be enabled in the system, so if you're interested, please let us know. Next, we'll jump over and take a look at the reports. So in the reports tab, you may have encountered where if you're looking to run a larger date range or something that the report has to do a lot of calculations on, it can take a long time to run. For example, you're looking to get the detailed profit report by source over the past 3 months. Previously, you could generate it, or you'd have to set up a timed report and then send it on a one-off. We now simply have this email link. You can email that report to yourself. It will run and process in the background and send you an email once that report has processed. So now you can go about your day, and you can then go back to that report when you're ready, when it's processed. While we're in the report queue here, we have a couple of new reports that are available. A detailed report, which is based on pings. The important thing on this report is that it does display unmatched reasons. And so you can use this to really drill down more into that incoming pings, either based on specific sources or on your account or the vertical overall. The next report we're going to look at is a change history report. It's actually something that one of our oldest clients has been asking for a very long time. But essentially, it is an aggregate of the individual histories of each of the partner account settings. So you will see the changes that are made for each of those partners in your system, and then of course the user that made that change, the old and the new value. So this is something that could be set up on a time basis, but also used if you allow, for example, partners to log in and they're getting questions. You can use this to drill down across partners here. All right. Next up, we're going to go to webhooks. So we do have a new webhook. It has an awful name, but typically you have the lead refund process. The rules here are set up for partners, but we now have one lead facing. The idea is that you can use this to send this back to your sources. So it is the same webhook, but it does have different rules, for example, applied to specific lead type and sources. So now you can, for example, automatically request a refund from your vendor or source based off of a refund request for your partner, or refund approval from your partner. All right, we're going to jump over to the APIs here. there are several new APIs that we want to take a look at. The first being that we have a new error code. And so this is available. This goes through the exact error that is received and the definition. This can be used for your own internal team if they're building calls, or for your vendors to help them troubleshoot it as well. The other API that we have here is the CRM status by phone. The idea here is for your partners that are using a CRM that have webhook capabilities, when a lead is marked closed or as that lead is updated in their CRM, you can call the API. Previously, this required specific partner IDs and or logins in order to connect. So it was hard to scale across multiple partners, let's say in your that we're using one CRM. We've removed those restrictions. And so if you did want to use this, only the phone number and the status then is required. So you don't even need to pass the lead ID. And this just gives you more flexibility. Of course, getting that feedback loop is super important. And so this just gives you more flexibility to do that. The last API that I'll touch on now, but we'll come back to, is the API for ping post consent. And so this is to handle that dynamic one-to-one consent requirement. So next we're going to go over to the partners tab. There is a tab that can be enabled for your system if it is not already, and that is the partner responses logs. This aggregates obviously the last responses from this buyer, and you can drill down to the fails or the successes and then export that for further analysis, which gives you another tab to really drill down and look at those specifics. Okay, and so next up, you'll have possibly noticed, if you've been updated already, that the manual entry form has been removed from the Forms Manager login. And that is because that Forms Manager will be phased out and replaced by the Form Builder. And so this manual entry form has moved to a sub-tab of settings. Operationally, functionally, it is all the same. I would say that with manual entry forms, doing things like seeding your clients, your partners for vetting them, you can use things like the match with partner ID to bypass distribution logic to make that vetting process easier. All right. So next up, as I mentioned, we have the integration for one-off transactions ready and enabled for Stripe. And it will look the same. As I mentioned, we are working on the same auto rebilling capabilities that you have with Authorize.net, CIM, and Braintree to be similar for Stripe. So in terms of Okta SSO, that is a specific company that we've done integrations with. It is a custom project, but again, if your partners or user are logging into multiple platforms, this gives the opportunity to do an SSO. So happy to explore that with anybody that's interested. So next up we have Boberdoo's Trust Center. This is on our website. so anybody can access this. Security is only becoming more and more important. It is something that we take obviously very seriously here, but also, our owner Brad and our CISO are almost obsessed about it. So we have our principles along with some high-level information uh, that you can access here. We did go through the SOC 2 process at the end of 2023. And so we can provide more information upon request on that information. But this is something, and often maybe you can point to your buyers if they are asking about how data is handled. This gives you a framework to work. Right. So that's going to bring us to dynamic consent. We're going to first take a look at the form builder. We do have a working demo site that has all of these options on the page, so you can check it out live here. And then also you can have that form builder enabled in your system. Currently, if it's not already enabled in your system, just let us know. We can get that enabled. So we'll go through the process of building a new form. So right off the bat, you'll have the option of making it the standard form, in which case you're submitting essentially a mode equals full details at once. Or if it is a dynamic consent form here, and you'll see there are additional options over in the advanced settings. We have default sources. So the idea here is that you can build URLs to drive and override source sub ID and the like, but these would be the default values that are used if there's nothing else present. Lead QC Lite, this is an on-page check. It is an optional add-on, but it gives any fields that fail that QC check, it pops it right to the form, giving the consumer the opportunity to correct it if it is an honest mistake. When we look at the CSS styles, so the new form builder is optimized for mobile. The default CSS, in my opinion, actually looks pretty good. But just like with the old forms builder, you could build your own CSS templates, either in the system or utilize a CSS URL to make your forms match your landing pages. Over here in the advanced settings, so we have the agree to text or agree button text that can be edited. There are options for enabling a select all or pre-select all. The warning here, I'm not a lawyer, but I would advise that you speak to your legal team about enabling these options, since that is more aggressive. Next up, you have your TCPA text, and then you'll notice that it is for both exclusive and non-exclusive partners. So the idea is that the use case is dynamic based off of that individual consumer. And so in one case, it may be exclusive, and then the next lead may be non-exclusive. The system is set up to dynamically handle both. Next up, you have thank you page options, and it is dependent on what happens with the lead. So when a lead is presented with the sellers, they make their selections, submit the rest of their information, and it posts successfully to those sellers. That is where we are on the match thank you page. You can display the dynamic matching partner info along with text. You can display text only, or you can redirect them to a different URL. Maybe you have a customized thank you page, for example. Now, where it gets interesting is what happens if there are no matches on that ping coming in from your form? What do you want to do? So if there are no matches on the ping, meaning there's no potential buyers, you'll see the same options exist, but maybe there is the option to redirect that, since you cannot sell that lead, to redirect them and sell it as a click. Alternatively, you can have them go through the flow. You'll see here we are in the final stages of implementing the continue with form so that you can collect the lead. Now, in that case, you probably would have a buyer that is not on it at that time, but that does not require the one-to-one consent. Since there were no matches on this ping, that means that there was no one-to-one consent given to any company. So that is really a use case where we're talking about reprocessing to buyers that do not require one-to-one consent, but also that we're not on a lead that does not pass your lead QC tech stack. So either third party or Bowerdy's lead QC essentially failed that lead, in which case that lead was not matched to the partner. And then again, you can customize either the text or redirect them to maybe another offer. So next up, we have our third-party scripts. The idea is that all you have to do is plug your credentials in for your Janaya script. The form has the default code already in there. So this is your LAC and your LCK. You can simply enter those values here for using Janaya. Trusted form works a little bit differently. It seems it's a base script on the for all forms, so it's simply enabling them, and then it will capture, create that certificate, and post that trusted form cert or Janaya ID into the appropriate field in your lead type. Next up, we have the field configuration. So this allows you to manipulate what is on the form. So Boberdoo works in, for example, very short field names, but if you wanted, for example, to edit this to be more in the form of a question, it can be done on this form only. And then that will be what is displayed, but still mapped to your project field. Some other use cases when you're looking at modifying or editing the form, if you look at our city and state here. So with a valid zip code, Boberdoo will automatically populate the city and the state. So you can see here, you have the option then to essentially make these not visible on the form and then just hide them so that they are automatically populated in the lead when it's posted. So this would also hold true for any calculated fields like age, for example, if you're collecting date of birth on the form, or if you're driving traffic to, let's say, a specific landing page aimed at a specific project. If you're driving them to a roofing specific landing page, just like with city and state, you can default that value to the appropriate project because you know what it is, and then simply hide it from the form so that it is not it's not displayed in the flow. And then finally, we get to the form layout. So you have options for naming the page, naming columns. It is all simply drag and drop. And you can choose when you are submitting that ping into the system to get the dynamic matching sellers. So if you have a multi-step form, Bobberoo will automatically only give you options after the ping fields are required. You have options for label alignment, a progress bar, titles, and again, this gives you the final layout of that. And then lastly, we have the embed script now for your website code, as opposed to the div script. So the trusted form landing page will be appropriately allocated to your landing page, and all of those related issues that may come up in an iframe scenario are resolved through the embed script. Right. So when we look at that in practice, just taking a look at our dynamic consent form. Again, any ping required fields can then be presented on the first page. System goes through and decisions that based off of the individual ping, whether it is an exclusive or a non-exclusive revenue scenario. The consumer can then enter in their info, select which companies. You will notice here there's some additional information that's returned with the potential matching sellers. This is out of the HTML offer in the system. So you can, for example, use a boberdoo number and charge for incoming calls or clicks. You can build a click lead type so that you can monetize research actions that a consumer may take before submitting the form or possibly instead of. And we have that confirmation of the matches. So that's going to then bring us to the ping post consent API. So we have the boberdoo forms. If you want to build your own forms, or if you are working with a vendor, these would be the specs that you would use to essentially emulate that same flow. The specs themselves look pretty similar. One big difference being the match with bid ID. So when the ping comes in, we are creating a unique bid ID for every potential matching seller, whether that is a direct seller in your system or a seller that is being returned through an aggregator or a lead reseller. All the other fields will essentially look the same. So when we take a look at the matched response example, you will see some additional process information. The top part here, really the same as it was before, but you'll get total bids, you'll get the best single bid, as well as, in this case, is an exclusive, so there is only one bid. And then the specific information of that bid ID. So the seller company name, HTML, and bid itself. Now these fields, we're really looking for your feedback on. Is there additional things that should be there or removed? You can certainly make those adjustments now that the processing is in place. Those are just tweaking the final details. Now, if we look at the match response of multiple bids, so think you're generating a lead, you ping this out to a reseller, or excuse me, your vendor pings into you, and you can have multiple matches, and your vendor may pick and choose which of these bids they want to use to display those sellers on their page. So in here, the top pretty much is all the same, but you have those individual bids for each company in there. So you'll have bid ID 333, 35, and 37, all with unique bids and companies that are associated with them. Those would be the dupe then, to make sure that you're returning only the appropriate sellers back to your vendor. So this decisioning logic, for example, based on best price, would also still honor things like user partner groups. So, if there was the case where you're looking to return the best single partner from carrier 1, carrier 2, and carrier 3, this would allow you to still maintain that functionality and bid on those independently as opposed to in the aggregate. So lastly, we're going to take a look in the leads tab just to see the log for that test lead that we went through. Pretty much looks the same. I really just want to focus on the ping scenario here. So it will look the same. We are still doing the best revenue scenario distribution logic in this case. And each one of these 4 buyers. So here we see a bid of $2, we see a bid of $29, and then we see that Veronica Inc. is a reseller. And so here are her bids that are returned to the ping that Home Model sent to this reselling buyer. So we are getting the actual 4 individual bids. Lastly, we have one more direct buyer at 30, and then the lead system goes through the best revenue scenario matches. So in this case, we can display up to 3, and we're taking the 3 highest, which is the $30 for one buyer, the $29, and then finally the $15.55, which is a seller that is returned through Veronica, the reseller. Ultimately, here we see that I only selected 2 of the 3, and then we can see those matches on the leads tab, just like we did previously. All right. Let me take a look here. So that is everything that I wanted to get through on today's call. Thank you for sticking through it with me. I'd like to open up for any questions. I know I see one question here about Stripe Visit live in QA systems. It is live. If it is not enabled, please just let us know and we can get it enabled. I believe anybody can unmute yourself so you don't have to put it across chat. And yeah, we will publish this webinar here as well. So the next question we have is, with the outside services update, can we turn on services such as IP quality score to check for inbound calls on the DNC, such as web leads? So we have run outside services on inbound phone routing. And so that's certainly something that we could get set up. Phone routing does work a little different. I'm not familiar with IP quality score myself as far as what's returned in the response and what is needed to make that call. For example, is IP needed? But we could certainly work with you to get that set up, at least to test. Any other questions we can answer? So next question is, will the new form build with the new form builder instead of the iframe?